Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Chase here. Today I'm going to be talking about effects in production and how I approach effects. So I got a question about, hey, I'm doing drums, or hey, I got this melodic instrument, and I'm producing something. What do I put on each channel? I don't really know. So today I'm going to kind of address maybe from a beginner or intermediate perspective about using effects in music production. So I've got a kick sound, a hat sound, and a piano sound. So I've got two drum sounds and a melodic sound, and then we'll go through kind of what effects I would put on them. And to me, there's two types of effects. My first one, I call it like sound correctors, which is generally going to be EQ and compression. That maybe help fix sound that's 90% of the way there or 80% of the way there. And then I've got just aesthetic effects like distortion, phaser, flanger, chorus, delay. All these are just going to change the sound and give it kind of maybe a new emotion or a new feeling. But they're not really used to correct it. They're just used to change it. So I've got this kick sound. I also wanted to go through like maybe loading up a drum sound. What the first thing I would do is, so step one I'm going to say is use the best sounds that you can. For example, I downloaded this one drum pack, and I noticed that all the drums were like pretty much peaking. Like I guess they were over zero on the master bus or something like that. So they were all kind of distorted and just didn't. They sounded kind of trashy. So if that's the case, yes, I can use these sound correction tools to get it into a better place, but why not just not even have to deal with all of that and just use a better sound? So just make sure you're using high quality samples or instruments when you're producing. So that'd be step one. And then step two, let's say I load this kick sound up and I'm like, okay, cool. When I hear this, I think it's pretty harsh, but maybe I could change it to make it sound better. So this is where EQ comes in my opinion. So if I like the sound a lot, but I think I can just, when I play it, I hear a lot of that high end, and I just want to kind of get rid of that high end to make it sound more like bassy. So I can just right, I can just low pass it and get it to a place where I like it. The other tip I have with EQ is when you're going to master a track at the end of the whole mixing process, the more low end you can remove that you don't need, the louder you can make the song. And loudness isn't everything, but you want to get it to just a decent, good, respectable point to where if you put the song maybe on Spotify or YouTube, it's people aren't going to have to change their volume knobs, when your song comes up. So that was one tip that I didn't really learn until maybe about a year ago, but it's really been helping me when I get to mastering. I can just pretty much crank the volume knob or crank my limiter up to where I want it to be. So yeah, that's a mixing tip I have. And then the other mixing tip I have with EQ is, I don't have a full song here, but if I did have a full song and I was EQing the kick, just maybe listen to it in the, like if I mix this kick individually and then maybe I put it in context with a lot of other instruments, I could really maybe it does need a bit more high end to come through the mix, but I would only know that if I was playing it with the entire track, right? So maybe it really needs to be here, but I don't quite know that yet because I don't have all the other instruments. So usually I like to EQ everything on the way in, like as I'm producing a track, and then when I go to mix it at the very end, I'm probably going to change the EQ on some of the stuff depending on what else is in the track. Yeah, so this is probably what I would do this kick. Not much else. Just let the low end come out and get rid of some of the highs. And with kicks, since it is an electronic kick and I know exactly what velocity I'm going to be playing it at, I don't really need to add compression, but you could use it aesthetically to maybe make it more round. So if I did want to compress the kick a little bit, here, let's see, I'm going to use an SL. Do just like a 2-to-1 to start off with a fast attack. See, even here, the volume dropped so much. See that? But I could compress a little bit. I find that it doesn't. I mean, it just depends on what kind of music you're making, but usually, if the velocity is good, I don't really feel like I need to compress the kick that much. Okay, moving on to, like, let's say you got a hi-hat sample. I've got these stock hi-hats from Logic. Here's it just dry. All right, so when I'm approaching this, like I said, I'm always going to add my corrective effects first, so I'm going to EQ it. And usually I like to EQ before compressing. This is what I was talking about with this low end. I can kind of drag the high pass filter. See right here, this doesn't even really sound like the original sound. I just want to get rid of the low end that I don't need. So around here, I feel like this sounds like the original hi-hat sample, and I'm just getting rid of the low end that I don't need. I think here I dipped, yeah, this frequency was bothering me. So I just, what I do when I'm, this is one thing that I do with EQ is like, okay, well, what can I get rid of? I feel like it's another rule of EQ is like, I really want to cut before I'm boosting. But when I do want to find out what I need to cut, I'm going to boost the frequency up, find out what really bothers me, and then just drag it down and widen it a little bit. And when you're making EQ cuts, I tend not to do anything super, super dramatic. I'm more so just getting rid of frequencies that I don't need. So I'm not, if I see an EQ that looks like this, maybe it does sound good, but for this, I feel like it just wouldn't make sense for a hi-hat, right? You just need to do small corrective motions, or I guess cuts, small corrective cuts, to get rid of things that you feel like you don't want. Right. All right, cool. So then after the EQ, maybe I'm doing something where this is where kind of my aesthetic effects come in. Maybe I'm doing something a little bit psychedelic, so then probably if that was the case, it depends what genre you're doing, maybe I would throw on some phaser. Right, to make it sound a little bit more psychedelic. And it really depends on what genre you're doing. Because let's say I was doing something maybe super aggressive or super abrasive, I could throw in some distortion and kind of change the timbre of the hats. See, that gives it a whole new feel to that phaser. And with the aesthetic effects, I feel like just playing around with distortion, playing around with phaser, flanger, chorus, all these effects will just give you a better understanding of what they kind of do and how they kind of work. And then the one tip, though, which I'll tell you next on the piano, I feel like delay and reverb have a little bit of a different feel to them, mainly reverb. So here we got this piano. What would I do to it? I just load in this bass sound. I'm going to play it for you a little bit. Right? I think this sound has a lot of 200, and this just comes with experience of like playing around with an EQ of like what you don't like. So I can tell, yeah, I've just dipped out some 200, 300. Just because look, if I do what I just did in the last EQ and raise it up, I feel like it's just really muddy and just kind of want to get rid of some of that muddiness. And then that's my other tip with EQ is like have intention with what you're doing. Listen to the sound and kind of think about what you don't want and what you can get rid of. And then I think I found this little, no, it shouldn't be there. It should just be just flat. Something like that a little bit. Right, so then from there, since this is kind of more of a live instrument and I'm playing it Unlike a drum, when it comes to like piano or synths, I'm usually adding a little bit of compression to them just to make it a little bit more, make it sound glued together and make it so if I play something really loud, here, let me play without compression. Right, this loud sound and this quiet sound, I want to kind of be a little bit more even. So I'm gonna, and right here I'm using SSL. I'm just gonna go like around 3 to 1, bring the threshold up a little bit, the attack a little bit. You can tell how much. So hold on a second. So you turn it on. So you can tell how much it's compressing right here. Bring it down a little bit. See, it's just compressing it a little bit. So those dynamics are just squashed a little bit. And I think it just makes the sound sound better, so there's not so much velocity difference going on. So with pianos, a lot of melodic instruments, I tend to just add a little bit of compression. After that, like maybe the sound I think needs some reverb. And right here is where this is kind of the only effect that I would advise against just putting directly on the channel. When you're putting reverb directly on the channel, you kind of have this mix knob. So it's going to tell you how much, like if I go 50%, I get 50% of the signal that I had and 50% of the reverb signal. Whereas if I add the reverb onto a bus and then add the reverb from there, I have the original signal plus the reverb in the background, and it makes it sound like the reverb is just sitting behind the piano, which is really nice. Right? All right, so there you have it. That's just my approach to effects. Usually my chain is always going to be the EQ first, and then the compression, and then any aesthetic effects that I want to use. And do note that the chain of which you put the effects in, like the order of which you put the effects in, matters. So if I put a compressor before an EQ, it's going to sound different. If I put a distortion before an EQ, it's going to sound different. I like EQing the main sound and then having the effects come after it. But it's up to you guys what you think sounds good. This is just the way I do it, and that's the beauty of music. It's subjective. So just go out there. I would say go experiment with the effects. But do note that I do think putting EQ on your drums and compressing your melodic sounds and adding EQ and getting rid of what you don't need is kind of the main thing that you should do first, and then from there add any aesthetic effects that you think sound good. All right, that's it. Let me know what other videos you guys want to see in the comments, and then if you like the video, just please like it and subscribe. I'd appreciate it, and thank you guys all for the support. Really appreciate it.